This is Storytime 2, and these are selections from the novel Spatula, written in 2006, under my old nom de plume Toadskabode. Boise. The children named the dog Boise after they had spun one of their number about in a circle and had the child blindly put his finger on a map in the disused classroom. The chosen name was read aloud. They all giggled at the sound it made. Perhaps some of them only giggled because the others did, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that they were united in their giggling. Roger had his arms around the dog's neck. "You're Boise, do you hear? Boise!" "Good Boise," he said. 3 or 4 of the children stood around the dog and patted and stroked him. Patrick, the boy who had chosen the dog's name by his random actions, took off his blindfold and zigzagged to a desk. "You spun me too hard," he said. "I'm still hungry," cried Pammy. "You're a crybaby," Roger told her bluntly. The dog, excited by the naming ceremony perhaps, barked loudly and ran out of the classroom. "Get him," Roger urged the others. He ran to the door and looked down the hall, followed by about half the children. "Boise! Boise!" they called. "I'm so hungry I could eat a dog," Pammy later admitted, after things had calmed down and the talk had listlessly turned back to the subject of possibly going outside. "You wouldn't eat Boise, would you?" Angela asked. "She might," Patrick, fully recovered now, and eager to continue in Roger's good favor, said. "Who is Boise?" asked Robert. He looked up from the pile of pages he had torn out of the old books in the room. "The dog, stupid!" Roger's voice was almost manifestly violent. "What dog?" Robert's eyebrows came together. His question was repeated by several of the other children. Embedded corn cob. Alone on the deserted battlefield, a rooster walked. His plumage was black, flecked with gray and white. Journalists, confined to the observation deck on a tower made of scaffolding, panels of plywood, and sheets of plastic erected at one edge of the field, noted the bird and, lacking anything better to report on at that moment, began composing stories either on the bird itself or using it as a colorful detail in the grand panoply of war. Soldiers from Unit C nicknamed the rooster Old Dave and adopted him as their mascot. One of the reporters read aloud from his draft. "Old Dave," one of the others repeated. "Where'd you get that, Tom?" "Made it up," belched Tom. He was drunk, like almost everyone on the tower. Old Dave, as he became known, except to those who insisted on reporting his name as Battlebeak or Mr. Walker, found an entrance to the underground tunnel he was looking for. The rooster took a moment to allow his eyes to adjust to the darkness, which was only relieved by a couple of dim bulbs hung from a board set in the dirt wall. "Where's Kathy?" he called out. "Who are you?" one of the handful of figures moving slowly in the gloom demanded. "Cardinal Bloom," the rooster answered. "I didn't know you, sir. I'm sorry. Kathy's in the hygienic unit at the other end," came the answer. A man was ordered to escort the cardinal to this place where Kathy was. Along the way, the rooster saw many wounded men and silently cursed the evil that was war. "Kathy!" The rooster greeted his old friend warmly when finally he found her. They embraced, following which the bird asked Kathy if she could possibly do something with his hair. The golf cart trade. Bob and Linda had taken to standing at the end of their driveway on Saturday mornings, waving little flags and smiling and cheering at cars passing by. Bob had a megaphone that he roared out generic salutations and cheers through. Beside them on the lawn, under a portable awning they had bought from a funeral home, were 2 golf carts. The words Brillstein Funeral Services had been carefully painted over with the words golf carts for sale. On approximately the fifth Saturday since this confrontational method of salesmanship had begun, Bob, perhaps a little tired of so much effort for so little result, and eager to do something else with his day, took to shouting things like, "God damn it, slow down!" and "Look at the golf carts!" He bellowed insults at cars which he had been sure were going to stop and shook his fist at them as they drove away. "Bob," Linda reproved, "that's not the way." "Fine." Bob pushed the megaphone into his wife's hands and clumped over to the golf carts. He got into one and started it up. "What are you doing?" Linda shouted. "You just keep doing what you're doing," Bob commanded, jabbing his finger at her. He took off with a jerk and began driving around the yard in an angry circle, tearing up sod that had taken years to grow. As Bob continued, Linda dejectedly put the megaphone in the other golf cart and then decided to sit in it. On an impulse, she started it up and followed her husband onto the newly created dirt track, hoping to embarrass him as he was embarrassing her. They raced about as if each were trying to both catch and elude the other. "Woo! Go! Go!" shouted people from passing cars who, though entertained, were no further induced to buy a golf cart. Okay. Dead Stripe Archive. The cheese smell that came from the box containing the Dead Stripe Archive was not made by the item itself, but by the packing materials that filled the remaining 3/4 of the box. Why such a large box was needed for the shipment of the Dead Stripe Archive is one of those mysteries of the packing and shipping industries that even I am not privy to. If you are really interested in the subject, I can look into it for you. For now, however, satisfy your curiosity with the knowledge that this cheese smell which the packing material gave rise to was roughly in the provolone category of cheese smells and was caused by the material being made of a certain type of fungus common to the banks of small streams in the area near where the Dead Stripe Archive is agri-manufactured. The smell was not unpleasant exactly, certainly not to someone such as I who is partial to earthy smells. There were those, females mostly, who did not like the smell at all, but for them the smell of the packing materials would be the least of their problems with any box containing a Dead Stripe Archive in their vicinity, for the Dead Stripe Archive was itself quite stinky. This odor, completely masked by the little fungal nodules surrounding the Dead Stripe Archive, was revealed triumphantly once the item in question was lifted from its box. "Ah, Aunt Susie has sent us a Dead Stripe Archive," some delighted man might say upon revealing his gift. He would not know beforehand what it was, because the box bore no descriptive words or symbols other than a generic consumer product label. "Terence, throw it away!" the average wife would cry, holding her nose and dashing about, knowing not in which direction to flee. The smell of the Dead Stripe Archive has been described as like that of an open can of oysters left in a hot car for several days, but I would dispute that claim as a woman made it. And I think finally, hold on one second. Okay. I can't read your chicken scratch. This was a recurring theme with my father. He came from a time period when a person's penmanship was an indicator of their breeding, education, and attitude towards the governmental, religious, and historical authorities that had charge over our lives. "Even the President of the United States has to wipe his butt," he told me, by way of impressing on me the fact that even those in the highest of stations must conform to the standards. He also said that if given an order by the President, I would have to obey it, something that I doubt and did even then. The penmanship conflict went on for a few years until I decided to stop writing in cursive altogether. Although looked at askance at first by teachers, there never seemed to be any further debate about it, and so I continued up until the present day. While the conflict was underway, however, I was subject to many headaches and confusions. One of the headaches, I don't mean that literally, was my mother forcing me to laboriously copy out passages from an old social studies book she dug up. I remember crying as I sat there slowly, tortuously making all those stupid, precise loops and connected reversals. In the years preceding the onset of instruction in cursive, or writing as my parents called it to my confusion, but I'll get to that in a moment, I actually looked forward to it. I had actually looked forward to it. When it started, however, I quickly saw what a horrible chore it was. It was around this time that the mysterious pains in my stomach began. Now, for one of the confusions. My parents, products of a post-Great Depression Southern rural upbringing, insisted that cursive was writing and non-cursive was printing. I, a product of television and encyclopedias, didn't know what they were talking about. Living in that house was like being a child of immigrants, speaking one language at home and another at school. Speaking of immigrants, what if I had been born in China and forced to learn calligraphy?